Now to use the sparkler setup to write something, for example, happy holidays, I'm going to go back into the system and I'm just going to hide other objects so I can only see what's inside of this geometry context. Then I'm going to grab Tommy over here and put down a draw curve node. I'm going to try to draw happy holidays in one go without letting go of the mouse, so there is only one primitive created. Yeah. All right. And then it's a little bit crooked, so I'm going to put down a transform node to rotate it a little bit. And I want to align the handles to the world. Then the transform is pointing straight up, so it's easier to move it up and down in the scene view. Now in the primitive section of the geometry spreadsheet, you can see I've succeeded in creating just one primitive because I never let go of the mouse. And now I'm going to use the carve node to cut the primitive. So this one will cut from one side, and then this one will cut from the other side. You can also just extract one point. You can see in the geometry spreadsheet there's only one point. I'm going to animate this value, so I'm going to put down a keyframe in here. And then I'm going to move a bit further in the timeline and put down another keyframe. And change its value to 1. But I think I want to use the cut option rather than the extract option, because I want to kind of use this line as motion blur. And then I'm going to move both keyframes a bit forward, so I'm going to hold shift and select the parts I want to keep. And then I can let go of shift and just middle mouse click anywhere in the selected area, and then you're able to slide it around like this. I think I want like this big of portions. So now I'm going to set the second keyframe. And around here, I want it to have disappeared. So I'm going to set the next keyframe here and let's see how this looks. Something like this. I think I'm happy with this. We got a lot of attributes, and that's because the draw curve node creates a lot of attributes by default. So I'm just going to go up and uncheck these. And you can see the attribute disappear from the geometry spreadsheet. And I forgot to version up, so I'm going to do that real quick now. So version 4. I'm going to resample this text. Let's take a look at the points. And then I'm going to put down a resample node. Connect it and move the blue flag. And then the distance between points should be 0.001 meter, maybe. How does this look? Yeah, I think it's good. And then I'm going to smooth the curve. I'm just resampling because up here the points are all over the place, so I just want the even space between the points. And then I'm going to smooth it. We can smooth it some more, so I'm just going to take the strength to 100. And now when we plug this into the carve node, let's see how this looks. Yeah, looks good. Then I'm going to move this over here and replace these spheres. I'm just going to cut these, delete this. We already version off, so I have this in a previous version. And then connect this to here and here. Let's see how many points we get scattered. And notice we're using scatter density scales, so it will scatter based on how much geometry there is to scatter on. We do get a lot of points, so I'm going to take down the density scale. something like this, 600. Let's try 60. Something like this. So I got some reference here so you can see how many sparks are coming off from the sparkler. So for now I'm just gonna say 137 per frame is okay. And now let's just see how this looks. So let's go all the way down here. I am going to reset the simulation. It's a lot of points, but let's just see how it looks in the render before we keep going. So I'm gonna go upstairs and I want to update my camera. This one. So I'm gonna lock the camera to the scene view and then just put it in a good place. You can take it a little bit to the side, something like this. I'm going to unlock the scene view again and go into Solaris. I'm gonna hide the grid, change the background to dark, and then I'm gonna check out the karma render, set the camera, and then I wanna look at it with the sparks. So first of all, I wanna make the line thinner. So I'm gonna pin the view and go upstairs into Geo. And here before I render out the center, I'm gonna create a new attribute. So I'm gonna put down an attribute adjust float. And I'm gonna call it width. Set it to something low, let's try 0.001. Maybe 0.003. Let's make a render test like this. So I'm gonna go back into Solaris and render out the sparkler. And since I already versioned up, I don't have to worry about overwriting anything. And the render is finished, so I'm gonna check it out in mplay. And compare it to the reference. So in the reference, the sparks are pushing out in the direction of the movement of the stick. So I'm gonna try to add that to my system. So I'm just gonna pause this and go back to my system. I'm gonna unpin the view and then I'm gonna version up. So we are at version 5 now. I'm back inside of the geometry node. I'm gonna go back to this curve up here. And what I want is the tangent of this curve. There is a vector that is pointing in the same direction as the curve is going. So I'm gonna put down a polyframe node. I'm gonna uncheck this because I don't wanna calculate the normals, and then I'm gonna keep the tangent. So now we got an attribute, tangentu, here. And we can also look at it in the scene view. So I'm gonna open up the info card and toggle the visualization on here. Right now the vectors are very, very big, so I'm gonna scale them down here. I'm gonna right click this icon and choose to edit the tangent point attribute and then just take the length scale down. When I'm scaling this down, it doesn't affect the attribute at all, it's only for visualization. And you can see this vector is going in the same direction as the curve, but it's kind of going backwards. And I want it to go forward like the reference, but I'm just gonna fix it later. Now if we connect this here, and then travel down the node tree to the scatter node, you can see that here we do have the tangent attribute still on the scattered points. And now I'm going to set it as the velocity. So here I'm going to put down an attribute VOP. Connect it and move the blue flag. And then inside I'm going to put down a bind node to pick up the tangent U attribute. So and it's a vector attribute, so I'm going to change this to vector, and then I'm just going to plug it into the velocity output. And now if we turn off the visualization for the tangent and turn on the visualization for v, the velocity, you can see it looks the same. I'm just going to scale down this vector as well. So I'm going to right click the visualization, and then I'm going to edit the v point attribute, and I'm just going to take the length scale down. Something like this. Now I'm going to go back into the attribute VOP, and I'm going to negate this value with a negate node, and this will just reverse the vectors. So you can see the difference. If we bypass this node, this goes in exactly the opposite direction. So now I'm just going to hide the velocity again, and I'm going to connect this attribute VOP instead of this old velocity. And then I'm going to go down to just the first layer of particles and reset the simulation and see how this looks. I'm just going to decrease the timeline to, let's say, 55. And you can see it looking a little bit closer to a reference. I want to give this initial velocity some random length, so I'm going to go back to the attribute VOP node. And I'm going to create a random value based on the frame number and the point number of these points. So I'm going to just put down an add. Then I'm going to add the frame and the point number. But the point number is blue, so it's an integer. So I'm just going to turn it into a float first. So integer to float. Integer to float. And I'm going to add this. And then I'm going to plug this into a random node. So this will create a random value based on the frame number and the point number between 0 and 1. So let's just write it out to a test attribute. So bind export. Just going to call it test. And you can see here we got a new attribute between 0 and 1. Then I'm going to put down a multiply node. And I'm going to multiply these velocities by this value. And we can see how this simulates different. So I'm going to hide the velocities again. Go down here. And you can see that there is more variation now in the length of the sparks. That is because the initial velocity of the points that are being fed into the sim is random. This random node creates values between 0 and 1, but I want a different range, so I'm going to put down a fit range node. So the source is set to 0 to 1, so that's good. But the destination, or that is whatever comes out here, I want to be between 0.5 and 2. So we can see how this looks different. If we reset the simulation. So we basically just have longer sparks. Because now we are multiplying the velocity with values between 0.5 and 2. I'm going to move the blue flag back up here and visualize the velocities again. So I want most of these points to have values close to 0.5, and then only a few of them to have random values close to 2. So what I'm going to do before the fit is put down a ramp parameter. And I have to change this to float because we are working with floats but not a vector. And then if you go upstairs, you can adjust this ramp here. I'm just going to change it to, let's say, B-spline. And then I want most of the values to be low, close to 0.5, and then just a few of them close to 2. Something like this. And you can see the difference between this and this. Now let's look at the simulation again. So hiding the velocity again and going down here and playing the simulation again. And now you can see most of the sparks are a bit shorter and only a few of them become quite a bit bigger. Now let's bring back a little bit of this random velocity that we created before. So if we go up here, once again, visualizing the velocities. And if you take a look at this node, you can see that the operation is set to add. So this noisy velocity value is added to whatever velocity value existed before. Previously, we didn't have any velocities before. But if we just hook this one up to the tree here, and then go to the velocity node, and let's just take the amplitude to 0, you can see that if I bypass this node, nothing changes. So let's just add a little bit of this noisy value on top of the tangent. Maybe something like this. So just a little bit of variance to the velocities. Then we can just hook this up to the rest of the tree. And I'm gonna hide the velocities once again. Go down here, see how this looks. And then we can look at it also with the second layer down here. Something like this. And let's just make a flipbook. So I'm gonna right click the flipbook icon. And then I'm just gonna untoggle resolution and crop. And let's compare to the reference. Yeah, something in the direction. I'm more or less happy with this. I just want the letters to be written out faster. So in the carve node, all the way up here, I'm just going to move these 2 keyframes backwards. So I'm going to hold down Shift and then select the keyframes and then just middle mouse click and drag these a little backwards, something like this. So now it goes a bit faster. And then I also want to check out the animation curves of these keyframe parameters. So to open the animation editor, just press Shift and click the parameter. And instead of ease in, ease out, I just want them to be linear. So I'm gonna select straight. And I'm gonna do the same to the second view. And then I'm just gonna select 2 of these and straighten them. So now it looks like this. Can take the timeline down to 44. Now let's go back down and do another flipbook. It didn't make a lot of difference and you might want to spend some time working on the animation, but I'm gonna leave it like this. So now we can go back to Solaris and find a good frame somewhere. And then I'm gonna pin the view and go back to my setup. And then I want to look at 1 layer at a time. So I'm gonna only connect the first particles. And compared to the reference, I want the initial sparks to be a bit thicker. So in this width node, I'm gonna take the maximum value to, let's try 0.001. Maybe even more, 0.002. I also want to give them a little bit of random thickness because right now they're all the same width. We still got the ID attribute, this one. So I'm going to use that to multiply each spark by a random value. So I'm going to put down another attribute adjust float. Put it in here. I'm going to change the attribute name to width because that's the attribute I want to adjust. And now it doesn't do anything because the operation is set to add and we are adding 0, so there's nothing. But what I want to do is multiply. So now it's multiplied by 0, but I want to multiply it by a random value. And then I want to randomize it by a custom attribute. And by default, it's set to ID. So you can see the difference if you crank up the max value, let's say 10. So now each spark has a consistent width going from thick to thin. But if we change this to element number, that's just the point number, you can see we have this inconsistent width. So I'm just going to take this back to custom attribute and use the ID. So the width attribute is being multiplied by random values between 0 and 10. So I'm going to change this to 0.5 and then the maximum should be maybe 1.2. So we basically just want a little bit of variation. It's not very noticeable, but it just makes it feel better. Also, you can use the remap ramp. I'm going to change it to B-spline, and then maybe if you want more of the smaller values, close to 0.5, you can do this, and then just a few high values close to 1.2. I think I'm more or less happy with the first layer of particles, but let's check out the second layer. So I'm going to connect this one. So first off, I think there are a bit too many. So I'm going to go into the pop simulation. And in here, I am going to take the constant birth rate of the replicate node down, let's say 100, so 1/3 of what it used to be. Then I'm going to go upstairs and reset the simulation. So now we have fewer particles. I would also like them to be longer. So back inside of the pop network, I'm going to increase the life expectancy. So let's say 0.02. And we can also increase the variance as well, 0.015. So now the life goes from 0.005 to 0.035. And I'm going to go upstairs and reset the simulation. And we got some longer particles. And then I might want to adjust their width. So let's take a look at the reference. So I'd like them to be a bit thicker. We could maybe double the max value. Something like this. And let's look at both of them together. So just remember to include the new attribute adjust node. And it looks like this. I think overall we have a bit too many sparks. So I'm just going to go all the way up to the scatter node. Let's have the amount of sparks, so 30. And reset simulation again. Maybe something like this. I think I also want the text to be a little bit thicker. So up here in this attribute adjust float node for just the text after the carve node. I'm just going to increase the constant value. Let's try 0.004. Maybe a little bit higher, 4.5. Yeah, something like this. Now let's render this. So I'm going to go back into Solaris, States, and I'm going to render the sparklers. I already versioned up, so I won't overwrite anything. And then I'm also going to render out the text alone. And in this case, I want to render out the full frame range. So in here, I'm going to choose render frame range. 1 to 44, that's good. And then I also want to add a folder in here. So I'm going to just copy paste the name of the file and the name of the node. And put it here, so slash, and then again. And I'm going to change the name of this node to text. So the files are going to be sparkler version 5, sparkler text. and render to disk. Then I'm gonna go back into Copernicus in here. And I'm gonna open up the composite view. And then I'm gonna replace these two files. So first I want the sparklers. And then down here I want the text. Then I'm gonna revisit the glow note for the text. Let's just take this way down. Something like this. Maybe we can make the tint a little bit more yellow. Something like this maybe. And let's see how the other glow looks. I guess we can make it a bit orange as well. Something like this. And then I'm just gonna write this out to disk. So render to disk. Now let's take a look at the comp. And let's compare it to the reference. I'm gonna stop here, but thank you for watching and happy holidays.